this is what you guys last studied. Okay, so we are starting now muscle flexion related information. We just summarized a bunch of stuff this morning, and now we'll solidify those concepts by looking at the concerned texts on this PowerPoint presentation. We still don't have 30. We have 29 now. Okay, we have liftoff. Right. So enough stretching, let's flex some muscles. Welcome back. Muscle contraction can be mediated by stretch reflex, or it can be mediated by voluntary intentions or voluntary contractions. And here we will look at the role of alpha and gamma both, okay, as we discussed this morning. So I'll be drawing from that live discussion, inshallah, in this PowerPoint presentation. Okay, first up, we will look at the muscle spindle related contractions and the role that muscle spindle plays in it. This is a very simple diagram in which he has shown the muscle to be stretched. You have increased afferent fibers. Let me just magnify this a bit. Okay. Right. So increase afferent signals to the spinal cord. It's okay if you can't read it. It's good now. So muscle is stretched, increased afferent signals to the spinal cord, then increased efferent through the alpha motor, and you have muscle contraction. Okay. Again, this is reflex contraction mediated by alpha motor neuron. So there is a mention of alpha motor, and when it contracts, very importantly, you can see that the firing rate of the sensory neuron decreases. It shows in this graph as well. When you stretch the muscle, the sensory information started to go up, and it went down when you contracted the muscle. Pretty straightforward stuff. If there are any questions, let me know. There shouldn't be any questions because this is really easy. Okay? But still, if there are questions, please do let me know. Now we are solidifying the stuff that we discussed this morning. Okay, class? Yes? Should I proceed? Okay. Okay. Right. Now, this is where you will appreciate the quote unquote protective. Welcome back. He is loading the upper limb with some bricks or whatever this is, right? And as the load increases, the muscle tends to get stretched by the load, right? And as soon as it's stretched, it contracts. So this is a good slide in revising the word loading from nerve and muscle classes last year. So when you load a muscle, it stretches. I like these words because this is typical muscle physiology words. Loading a muscle. So when you load a muscle, it gets stretched, and when it stretches, it contracts. This is a classical, simple description of what muscle stretch reflex is. Right? Questions? Any issues with this? This is pretty basic stuff. It's my habit of repeating things and showing some pictures or graphs to solidify or repeat the stuff so that it becomes a concept in your head. Okay? Okay. Now, Again, this is should not come as a surprise at all. Hold on, let me just look at this frame here. Here you go. Okay. Now this is stretch. It's also called myotatic reflex. Very simple. Stretch of a muscle causes contraction of the muscle. Now, this is where we are now going into some detail. I mentioned it to you in the morning that we'll go into some detail. So, types or phases, okay, or stages. There are two. One is the dynamic stage of the stretch reflex, and the other is the static phase of the stretch reflex. Okay, by now you have read these words thrice in three different situations. The dynamic and static sensory response of the muscle spindle, that was one. Then you had dynamic and static gamma efferent fibers, that's two. And now you're looking at the same words in a third context, the stretch reflex. Well, basically, welcome back. So, as I was saying, this is not new because this is based on the static and dynamic sensory responses that you have studied already. But still, I wanted to say it out so that there is no confusion. Students, when they go through this chapter, there is a lot of dynamic, static word usage in different contexts. So here I have I've just mentioned it in all those three contexts. Okay, they are interrelated, of course. So when a gamma dynamic fiber fires, it increases the the dynamic sensory output of the nuclear back fiber. So it is related. All these dynamics and all these statics, they are related. Okay, and they, by the way, form the dynamic response of the stretch reflex as well. So it's actually one whole thing shown to you in three bits separately, because obviously we can't have extremely long lectures. Okay, so the lecture is divided into time instances, where in one instance you read the sensory dynamic and static. In another instance, you study the gamma efferent dynamic and static. And today you are discussing the same words, the same responses in the stretch reflex context. I hope this is clear. So, the stretch reflex is mediated by, the dynamic is mediated by 1A, while the static is mediated by 1A and 2. And this should be now familiar to you. The static response is mediated by 1A and 2, and the dynamic one is mediated by 1A if you remember your sensory physiology, sensory muscle spindle physiology. Okay. So final point is the dynamic stretch reflex is also called phasic. It comes in phases. It's not there all the time. While the static one is called tonic. It's there for a longer period of time. Okay? The classical example of stretch reflex is knee jerk. Questions? Any questions? Okay. So this is that very old diagram in which you have the rectus femoris, and this is the muscle spindle. This is that 1A fiber going through the dorsal horn and terminating on the, what is this? This is the alpha motor neuron for the muscle, concerned muscle. Okay? So, afferent, and then in green you have efferent. Okay? And you can see right here that it's a monosynaptic reflex. This is a monosynaptic reflex in which the afferent directly innervates the efferent neuron. And remember, when you don't have any interneurons in between, when you have this sort of monosynaptic situation, you have very good control, very fine control over the muscle contraction, or very fine conversation between the sensory and the motor division of the CNS. The more interneurons are involved, it takes more processing, and there might be a signal loss issue. However, when there are less number of synapses involved in an arc, then you have more fine control, as I'm sure it sounds also very rational. You also are seeing now that there is another division which here, hold on, there's another division here which we didn't speak about because, no, I mean quick, fine as in fine control. So more close control in the less number of synapses. More number of synapses means signal loss and all those kind of things. I mean, I'm comparing these two things. These two things are English wala fine. However, if you want more control, you would want less. Remember, in the physics electric circuit, the less number of resistances, the better for current flow. This is exactly that kind of thing. Okay, right. So this we will discuss when we'll discuss. Hold on. It does. It does. It is multifactorial, and today you've learned that number of synapses is a factor in that. Okay, right. Okay. The other aspect is inhibition of the antagonist muscle. Remember, whenever you want to contract a muscle, which happens to be around a joint, it's equally important to inhibit the antagonist muscle. Okay? So agonist needs to contract, equally important the antagonist needs to be inhibited, then this will contract properly. Okay? So the stretch reflex stimulates directly the agonist, but a branch also very importantly inhibits the antagonist. More of this when we discuss reflexes formally tomorrow. Okay? Chalo. So a bit more on the, I hope this color is not distracting. I can change it if you want. It will take me a bit of a while, but if it's clear, then it's clear. Is the text clear to you on this slide? It's clear. Great. That's great. Okay. Now, so we are discussing dynamic phase or dynamic component of the stretch reflex of the knee jerk. It is elicited by obviously a dynamic tap on the patellar tendon. So when I say this is, listen up, when I say this is elicited, what I mean to say is when you do your jolly old knee jerk, so when you tap the knee at the patella with a reasonably sharp blow of your reflex hammer, the first thing that happens, this is the concept now, okay? The first thing that happens is stretch reflex dynamic component. Welcome back. This is part of your practicals as well, where you'll be performing deep tendon reflexes. When you do the knee jerk, when you hit the patella, the first thing you see, if you hit it properly, that the knee would extend. But that is the dynamic component of this reflex, and it is present in all the deep tendon reflexes. We call it DTRs. Okay, so the dynamic component is that loud thing that you see immediately when you achieve or when you perform or when you supply the stimulus for the respective reflex, right? So that sharp tap of the patella acutely stretches the quadriceps femoris, which stimulates the, now you know the technology behind it, which stimulates the dynamic bag fibers, because we know that anything sharp, by sharp I mean anything quick, is picked up by bag fibers in the dynamic response, sensory response. 1A does this business. It conveys the the argument to the spinal cord, and this typical stretch reflex then gets mediated. The knee is extended by contraction of the agonist muscle, and now I will add the inhibition of the antagonist muscle. यहाँ तक ठीक है? Is this okay till now? From here till here in this red box, all good? Hurry up, hurry up. All good? Should I proceed? Great. Now, check this out. What is this? A slower static response. A slower static response ensues. Now remember this, please. I'm not sure it's given like this in the textbook. When you perform a deep tendon reflex, the first thing that happens is the dynamic component. Okay? However, it is followed by a slower static response. So the muscle spindle just doesn't give you the dynamic response and contraction and that's it. No. The slower static response, which also got triggered when you hit the patella, gets to show itself when the dynamic response is over. Sorry, welcome back. I'm saying it doesn't get said, so I'm saying it. So first is the dynamic, then is the static. Now, the clinical bit we'll be discussing tomorrow and then later on in the descending tracts. But I just want your eyes here on this section of the slide, please. This is the UMN, upper motor neuron lesion. Please just look at this so that you have a memory of this. Okay? And remember, we discussed it under the stretch reflex. So please remember, we mentioned upper motor neuron lesions that can exaggerate a stretch reflex. Just remember that. Okay? And that these reflexes are absent in a thing called spinal shock. That's enough for now. Any questions on this main stuff? Okay. Then we talk about the static itself. So it can be elicited. It gets elicited by the dynamic response as a follow through of the dynamic component. So how does the static response manifest? बेटे वही बता रहा हूँ, ठीक है? So first is the follow through of the dynamic response. The static is there. And now you can, okay, hold on. It's the tone, Abdullah, just to give you the answer. It's the tone. The muscle tone is still taut. The muscle is still taut even after, sorry about that. Even after the muscle's dynamic response is over. Okay, to give you your answer. Now, so but the static is not just a follow through of the dynamic. You can actually elicit it as a separate function. So I've mentioned this as a follow up of the dynamic response, or you can passively bend the knee. So in a live person, when you are alive, as opposed to the dead body, in which when you flex it, you will literally feel in the cadaver, you will feel that if rigor mortis hasn't set in, it will be free. So I was saying in the live person, live as in awake and live, not unconscious, you will feel that when you passively bend the knee, you would feel that you are actually doing something. You will actually feel in your hand. This is a very perception-based thing that I am trying to explain to you verbally online. So you can imagine the loss of signal here. Signal as in quotes wala signal. But when you bend a knee passively, you feel a certain degree of resistance put up by the knee. That is what he mentions by when you passively bend the knee, you passively stretch the quadriceps femoris, and This passive stretch triggers the static nuclear chain mediated response that you have now studied many times, okay? And this causes a sustained tonic contraction of the muscle, which manifests itself as an increased tone. It's more subtle than your brutal dynamic response, which tuck extends the knee. This, however, is just a subtle increase in tone. Yes? So we have studied that A, it can be elicited by as a follow through of the dynamic response. B, when you want to do it independently, you passively bend the knee. It goes into your typical standard static response, which then causes a sustained contraction of the muscle, which manifests itself as increase in tone. And by the way, this is where it also needs to be mentioned that this is how you maintain a posture. Can I tease you with something? Try getting up from your seat without bending the knee. Try to get up vertically. I mean vertically by what I mean is voluntarily try to contract the quadriceps femoris and try to get up without bending the knee. Welcome back. Did you get my question? Or rather challenge? We can't get up without bending the knee. Okay? So what happens? Yes, but if it's a typical L, in the typical L configuration, you can't get up. Okay? It's not possible. Maybe it's possible for Abdullah Javed. We don't know. Maybe he is the mutated next generation of human beings. But for us mortal beings, it's not important. It's not possible. Okay? Why is it not possible? I'm going to explain it to you right here. These are the magic words. Can you see I can't see my finger here. Okay. These are the magic words. Okay? Maintaining posture. Now remember, please remember this. Static component of stretch reflexes help you in your daily posture business. You're getting up, you're sitting down, your movement. Most of the walking and running of the lower limbs are augmented by the static stretch reflex. How? Well, let's take, for example, the standing up challenge. When you bend the knee, basically what happens? This happens. This happens. The stretch reflex happens. So when you bend the knee, he has actually bent the knee here. When you bend the knee, the stretch reflex gets triggered and it contracts the muscle. When it contracts the muscle, it's an extensor of the knee, right? It helps you extend the knee. Simple. Okay? So in this case, you haven't done the dynamic wala jhatka. You actually have passively, nicely and smoothly bent the knee. So the static component of the stretch reflex literally helps you stand up and maintain your posture while you're doing it. It keeps the knee joint stable, tight. Welcome back. Is that clear? This is the application of the static stretch reflex. Okay? Anyone can suggest something. What can be a possible application in practical life of the dynamics phase of the stretch reflex? I mean, this is obviously a clinical test, isn't it? But what about daily life? Anyone? I hope that silence is the silence of your thinking and not your procrastination. Come on, come on. Think. Say something. Any ideas jumping up would be welcomed. Any practical manifestation or example of the dynamic component of the stretch reflex? Yes, yes. Okay, fine. Noor, I'll take that. Hmm, that's passive. So any acute scenario, okay, anything which makes the muscle jump in stretch, sudden stretch. You are running or walking, and suddenly you come across an obstacle which is unexpected, and the muscle gets stretched oddly in that one bit of a second or something. That bit is equivalent to the knee jerk that you elicited in a patient, right? Anyhow, this is threadbare discussion. You can always discuss, excuse me, you can always think about these things in your time. Yeah, the foot corrects itself. Okay. Now, enough on stretch reflex. Of course, you'll read this up on your own as well. Now we discuss the contractions of the voluntary section. Welcome back. We've done this, the hybrid car analogy. We've discussed how alpha motor and gamma motor together work. But just to jog your memory, remember this diagram which I just showed you? Yes, in the beginning of the lecture. Is there any mention of the gamma motor? Nope. Because this is your typical stretch reflex contraction brought on by the stretching of a muscle. Again, this should be very clear now because we just discussed it in the FaceTime discussion. Okay? So it's important that when muscles get stretched, they get contracted and then they stop this business. So one single stretch should be followed by one simple contraction in a reflex world. Okay? Is this clear? The next slide would have been very controversial if we hadn't had the FaceTime this morning. Shall we proceed? Yes, Noor. It is stretch-induced stretch reflex. That's right. Never say it to an examiner. He may get confused. Okay. To the controversial slide. Not too controversial for you guys though. Hopefully. Voila. So do gamma motor neurons have anything to do with stretch reflex? Is the elephant in the room, isn't it? Yes and no. You know the yes and you know the no. I'll say it out anyway. Yes, because they do set the muscle sensitivity. And this sensitivity, remember the rubber band thing that I did? So by setting the sensitivity, they sort of adjust or they set the stretch reflexes intensity of the response. So if they are more taut and now you stretch them, they will respond more than if the gamma efferent is not very angry and it's just basal level and now you stretch it, the response will be more mellow. Welcome back. Do you follow this bit here? This discussion? You should, because we have been discussing this. This business of muscle spindle sensitivity set up by the gamma motor neuron. You should be able to understand this now. If you're not, then you have a backlog issue and you need to clear some concepts previously discussed. Okay? So with this, we move on to the no. Why is it? Well, we've discussed the yes. We'll now discuss the no, because it doesn't have any role to play in the reflex muscle contractions brought on by the muscle stretch. We just discussed it. Capish? Guys, where are you? Hello, is anybody in the house? The examiner may never ask you this. That's why I've mentioned it. That these are deep concepts. The examiner will probably ask you the function of muscle spindle, which I'll show you in a slide anyway. You just say that. They will ask you stretch reflex. What does it do? What is the role of gamma efferent? You know, the mundane type of questions. However, it becomes interesting if the examiner goes into, if the examiner likes CNS physiology and he likes you at that moment, or she likes you, then he may throw at you a clinical disorder or a clinical scenario which involves this business. Now that will be most interesting and a place where you can show off your credentials. Okay? But the basic stuff is basic. For my students, this should be basic. Yes, that's right, Abdullah. That's right. Okay, we move on. Clear this up. A bit about anatomy. I can't get away from it. I was thinking where to place this information. To be honest, this slide should naturally go to this slide, but then you would say, hey, welcome back. Noor, the jury is out there on that one. Anyway, so the origins of the gamma motor, very quickly, you will study this, should study this in anatomy. By the way, 30% of the total motor output is gamma. So gamma motor is not your, is not insignificant. So out of 100, it's actually 30, which is saying a lot in biology. Okay. The main area is this guy here, this region here, in the brainstem. So remember brainstem when you are thinking about gamma motor efferents. This area is found to be the most important in stimulating your gamma motor efferent neuron in the spinal cord. Stuff comes out of this area a lot. Okay, it has been found. Abdullah, insan ban jao. Okay. So bulboreticular facilitatory region in the brainstem is the main instigator behind gamma motor functioning. Okay, and further you will find these three we will be discussing later on: cerebellum, basal ganglia, and cerebral cortex. These also affect gamma motor, but also but even they are at the behest of bulboreticular area again. So remember bulboreticular facilitatory area in the brainstem, and you're good to go when we're discussing the origins of gamma motor. Okay. This is important. This is physiology. This bulboreticular area, peculiarly but relevantly, is mainly concerned, seems to be concerned with anti-gravity muscles and their contractions. Okay. Mind you, anti-gravity muscles are also very high on muscle spindles. You just need to connect these two informations and you're good to go. So bulboreticular area is anatomically connected with your gamma efferent neurons of the spinal cord. Point number one. Point number one. Number two, most of this area seems to be controlling or connected to the anti-gravity back and lower limb muscles, and those muscles are rich in muscle spindles. This is painting you a very fine and clear picture. Welcome back. So gamma motor is very important in walking and running movements. These bulk movements of the lower limbs. Okay? I'm not saying it's not important in other movements, but it's mainly important in these movements. Okay? With this dose of anatomy, we move on to safer shores functions. So, I think I've made my job a tad bit easier by giving you a dose of this initially, but here it is formally. The functions of the gamma motor efferents are twofolds: sensory related and motor related. Please remember to use the word related if you are brave enough to write in your SEQ based on this material. Most of you will probably read a small book which starts with an F and just, reproduce those few lines, and that will be end of that. However, the few loyal ones, I hope there are few amongst you, who will refer to this sort of material, which was extracted from experience and from many books, etc., and mention it like this, like "Padhne wala bachcha." Okay, so gamma motor functions relate with sensory, which by now I'm sure you know already, what I'm talking about, and motor related. Okay, sensory related. What is sensory related? This one line says it all. It regulates the sensitivity of the intrafusal muscle fiber. That's it. This is, if you remember this, you're good to go. And if you remember my lecture in which I took a rubber band and stretched it and then plucked it in the middle to show you that if it's stretched, the response is more vibrations per pluck, per picking, and if it's less stretched, then the vibration is lesser. Okay, so with this information, we'll just read through this, that if a dynamic efferent stimulated muscle, it is extra sensitive to, welcome back, again I was telling you this bit here, let me just clear this off. I'm now explaining this bit and this bit's here. Okay, so this is obviously related to the dynamic efferent. So if there is a muscle, imagine there's a muscle which is rich in bag fibers, nuclear bag fibers. Nuclear bag fibers are innervated by which type of gamma? Say N. Go on. Which type of gamma fiber stimulates the nuclear bag fiber? This is like an attendance call as well, to see who is where. Dynamic. What about the rest of you? There's 70 on the clock. Go on, I want new names. Come on. Good. New names. Thank you. More new names, please. Can we have a roll call here on this point so that I... Thank you. Thank you very much. Dynamic. Good. So are you with the program? So if you have a muscle, imagine you have a muscle which is rich in dynamic nuclear bag fibers, you know that they're stimulated by the dynamic efferent component. Okay, so these muscles will be extra sensitive to quick changes naturally. Yes, and if there's a muscle which is rich in nuclear chain fibers, it will be sensitive to static changes, i.e. the bulk amount changes in length. This is rate of change, amount of change. Yes, this is again old information just being given to you in the context of gamma efferents. This is the dynamic response, this is the static response. I'm just connecting the gamma efferents to it now. Just nothing new, to be honest. Okay. Now we move on to motor related, and this is where the coactivation now comes in. So in the motor related function of gamma motor, we've already done this. If this is a muscle, it's relaxed. Muscle spindle fibers are sensitive to stretch, so it's minding its own business. Now you contract the extrafusal. Achha, this is extrafusal, this is the spindle. So you understand, right? So this is the extrafusal. You contract it without contracting the intrafusal fiber. Look at what happens. Dhila. Welcome back. If you were to hypothetically contract the extrafusal only, this is the problem that you'll get. This is the problem that you get. This is a bad problem to have, because now the muscle fiber has slackened and it's not sensitive to stretch. It has literally stopped working. Agreed? Agreed? Okay. So how do you go around this? You contract the intrafusal fiber along. So you co-activate alpha and gamma motor neurons, so that you don't have this situation here. This situation, bad situation. This situation, good situation. So extrafusal and interfusal both contract, the spindle gets to be taut and gets to keep its function. And very importantly, guys, there's something else that goes on. We don't want, and this is a candy question. Wallah, I would have given candy and even a chocolate actually, who would respond to this question. Question coming up. Tell me one more bad thing about this scenario. Let me clear these things out. This laxity, one issue I've told you. The one issue is it stops being sensitive to stretch, which is its function, and that's obviously a big boo-boo. What else? What else is a big problem? Maza aa jaye waise, if somebody answers this one. Tone, no sensory input, no smooth contraction. Hold on. Empty 99. Okay, people are also commenting on tone, fine. So the tone and the contraction, people, could you elaborate please? What do you mean? Why would there be a disturbance in contraction? Empty 99 please. Empty 99, please stand up and tell us, why did you write disturbed contraction or something to that effect? You need, it's physiology, it's all about the why. Welcome back. Why does this cause contraction issues? And it does cause contraction issues, by the way. So why? It is about contraction, guys. I'm giving you a hint now. Empty 99 is thinking. That's a very good feature of a young man thinking. Very good. Think. The rest of you think as well. What is happening? Do you need another hint? Hint number one was it's related to muscle contraction. Don't just throw stuff at the screen. Make sense of it, Haris. Do you need another hint? Come on, you need it. We have limited time. Take the hint. Hint number 2 coming up. Hint number 2 is that this is related to stretch reflex. Now somebody should really answer. It's still a toughie. Toffee nahi, toughie. It's tough. Still tough to answer. The serene silence of people thinking. Because spindle fiber is not sensitive to stretch now. What does that mean, Hira? You are really on the cusp here. If somebody can just connect and steal the answer from her. No stretch reflex. So what has this got to do with contraction, Noor? You are on the cusp of the cusp. Aye, aye. No, no, Abdullah, no. Go back to Noor and Hira's answer. No, empty. What happens when you stretch the spindle? It contracts. Shabash. And it would help you in this scenario. Will it help you in this scenario? If the spindle would be taut, it will induce the stretch reflex valley contraction to help with the whole gross contraction, wouldn't it? Yes, Noor. Yes. But since it's welcome back, I'll say this again. When this got laxed, it stopped the stretch reflex induced augmented contraction. Remember the hybrid example that I gave? In this, the hybrid would be the extrafusal running on fuel and the intrafusal running on electric. So when you contract the extrafusal fibers, you at least don't want the intrafusal to negate the contraction. Well, they will negate it if they go lax, because when they go lax, they stop helping the extrafusal fiber by stretch reflex induced contractions, which are supposed to help the extrafusal contraction, which by the way happens when you contract it by gamma motor and now you have kept it stretched, so that in the stretch situation it will help you by inducing a stretch reflex valley contraction, which helps with the extrafusal contractions as well. At least doesn't negate it. Do you understand the negation point? I sense that the class is going blank on the negation. Look, should I explain? Or is it clear? Guys? Is it clear? Or should I explain? Okay. Okay, I'll explain. Okay. Now listen up. I'm going to explain this here. This part. Got it? I'm saying my contention is that this situation in this part of the slide, this muscle spindle going laxed, this actually opposes the extrafusal fiber contraction mediated by the alpha motor neuron. I'll explain now how. Okay. This is a stretch reflex. This is a stretch receptor, right? Welcome back. When it stretches, which is it's not right now, but I'm just saying, if it were in a stretch situation, it would mediate that stretch through the spinal cord, through the alpha motor neuron, and where does the alpha motor neuron terminate? Extrafusal fiber. Yes? Which, are you with me? But you would, no, Noor, not extrafusal beta, no. The extrafusal, no, I think you wrote intrafusal, sorry, the extrafusal fiber, okay. But you would argue that, sir, we are already using the alpha motor to contract voluntarily the extrafusal element. I would say, yes, bete, but remember that it comes in pulses. Yes, it comes in pulses. So it's not one smooth thing. Plus, if you don't take care of your friend, it will become your enemy. How? When you don't take care of this and it goes into dhilapan, like you guys, it laxes, the stretch is gone, the drive to the alpha motor is gone, it tells the alpha motor, the muscle is relaxed, it's not stretching, no need to contract it. Cancel the stretch reflex induced contraction, please. Now that signal, wouldn't it sort of conflict the alpha motor neuron? What do I do? Do I follow the voluntary command of contracting this muscle, or do I follow the conflicting signal coming from the muscle spindle that nothing is wrong, no contraction needed? I think I've nailed it. Come on, guys, say yes. Uh, Horace, no, it increases, it helps it. No, it doesn't take precedence, it helps. It helps with the contraction. Remember when I mentioned that it comes in pulses and stretch reflex induced contractions, they help plug the gap, fill the gap. This is one. Okay, welcome back. Are we sort of clear what just happened? बेटे स्ट्रेच रिफ्लेक्स कॉन्ट्रैक्शन का असर एक्स्ट्राफ्यूजल पे होता है, रिमेंबर? मसल गेट्स कॉन्ट्रैक्टेड बाय एक्स्ट्राफ्यूजल एलिमेंट, नॉट इंट्राफ्यूजल. And this shows the deficiency in your initial lectures. No, it's not. I mean, you can imagine, and remember, this is all hypothetical, Abdullah. It doesn't happen, beta. What happens is coactivation. We are explaining this only to tell you why coactivation is actually crucial. If you don't activate the gamma efferent, then what would happen is this negation, and that will be silly, to be honest. Okay. Can I quickly just steal you away from this slide and show where Guyton mentions it and how it mentions it? Shall I do that? So that you know exactly where it's written and exactly where to hate it? Logi, this is where it says it. Right here. It's this heading and this explanation. To be very precise, is there a highlighting tool here? Oh, come on, where is it? Is there a highlighting tool? Is this the highlighting tool? No. Yeah. Right here when he discusses this. No, ji nahi. Nahi sir, nahi. Yeah. First, it keeps the length of the receptor portion of the muscle spindle from changing during the course of the whole muscle contraction. Therefore, coactivation helps the muscle spindle reflex from opposing the muscle contraction. 3 lines. Did you see that? He hasn't, welcome back. He hasn't really explained it here well either. So when he discusses it here, this is actually an application of a concept he should have explained properly here. So both of these paragraphs actually are not well written, to be honest, in my humble opinion. That's that. That's where we step in. Okay? You guys clear? So coactivation, you know now why it's important. Coactivation, so that the thing doesn't oppose. There is no conflict between extrafusal and intrafusal input. We quickly go on to the damping function. By the way, the averaging out or damping, it's the same thing. Guyton mentions damping and averaging out. This is a muscle fiber. This is a muscle which is stimulated with the muscle spindle intact at an impulse rate of 8 per second. And this is a muscle which was stimulated with the muscle spindle dissected out or damaged, and you can see the wreck that it has occurred, that it has taken place. Okay. Do Should I explain the context of this? We are talking about the damping function the muscle spindle achieves under the coactivation of alpha and gamma motor neurons. Okay, when the muscle spindle is functioning properly, look at the smooth contraction profile of the muscle. Even though you are stimulating it in pulses, just like the spinal cord does, here you are stimulating it at 8 per second. No, yes, Noor. No stretch reflex here. So when you take out muscle spindle, you take out its augmentation, the hybridness of the muscle spindle. This is what it looks like. It looks very angry. It looks all over the place. This is not graceful and you won't get work done. Imagine getting up like this. Okay, maybe in the morning you do get up like this, but imagine holding a glass like this. It's not possible to live. Okay, chalo. Any questions on this? We are coming to really the end of the end. Any questions? And you notice there is, yes, yes, he'd be proud. Okay, this is the clinical side of things, and this is where I want to leave you guys with. This is the overall summary of muscle spindle. This is the SEQ attempt from the exam point of view. Have a read of it. There's nothing really that I can add to this slide. This is a summary slide, and when you're done, please mark your attendance and off you go. So for your ease, I basically divided it into sensory and motor component. Okay, so muscle spindle has these both functions. Anyway, let me know when the attendance is done so that we finish this inshallah. Okay, we've discussed pretty complicated stuff of a complicated subject today. We have clocked about 2 hours, just a bit more than 2 hours collectively in both lectures. Okay, please go through it at your earliest convenience today, because tomorrow we'll be doing some clinical stuff, and you can imagine if you don't understand the basics, you will be lost in the clinical stuff. Okay, and the clinical stuff is not just relevant to this. It is also relevant to the descending tracks that we'll do in the next chapter. So I really hope that you guys come on time tomorrow and you have revised this stuff. Both of these lectures will be available on YouTube as I finish this off. Okay? The attendance is done apparently. So Assalamu alaikum. See you tomorrow. 9 o'clock.